Well, let's go ahead and get into it.
Yeah.
Thank you everyone for joining us on this Friday afternoon. Before the weekend starts, I'm Susan Demas, the executive editor of Lincoln Square, and joining me today is my friend Holly. Sorry, Holly McCall from the Tennessee Lookout. We're former colleagues, and she is an award-winning columnist, extremely funny. You should definitely check out anything that she writes. And she also has a background beyond journalism in public affairs. I believe you ran for office once. So you've kind of done everything.
It was a chaotic attempt to make the state better through politics.
Yes. Um, and you're also a fourth generation Tennessean, so you've kind of seen it all. And I want to start there with what's going on in your state, because Tennessee is a red state with a heavily Republican legislature, and that's like most of the South. But I was really struck by Anne Applebaum's article in the Atlantic back in 2023, where she asked, "Is Tennessee really a democracy anymore?" Which seems rather prescient from for where we're at today in the US. But that came after two African American lawmakers, Justin Jones and Justin Pearson, were of course expelled from the House. But there's been a lot that's been going on over the years. So I'm curious, is Tennessee uniquely undemocratic compared to other states, or what do we need to know about what is really going on there?
Unfortunately, Susan, first of all, thank you for having me. It's great to see your face. It's great to be part of the Lincoln Project for just this moment in time. I would say that Tennessee is not, unfortunately, unique these days. However, Tennessee got off to an early start and was cutting edge on some of these policies we're now seeing at the federal level. As a matter of fact, I heard a Democratic lawmaker say not long ago Tennessee was the training grounds for Project 2025. Among
Mhm.
some of the laws that have passed here, Tennessee was the first state in the country to pass an anti-drag law that has continued to be upheld. I think even at the U.S. Supreme Court, and the governor signed that very quickly. We passed a trigger ban on abortions. I think in
Right.
2020 or 2019, and so when Roe v. Wade was struck down by the Supreme Court, the trigger ban went immediately into effect. So I don't think we're unique now, sadly, but we were cutting edge.
Yes. But Tennessee was not always a red state. I guess I'm curious what happened. Was the point of no return when Al Gore lost his home state in the 2000 election, or what was kind of the turning point?
Well, I mean, as a matter of fact, I think many people would agree with you that that was the turning point. I think it was more of a symptom of change rather than the cause of the change. So, Tennessee, and you cut me off whenever you want because I can expound on this ad nauseum. So,
You are
Tennessee,
the expert.
yeah,
We are looking to you for insight.
well, all right, stand by. They did have a Democratic supermajority legislature from Reconstruction until 2008, I think it was. And I think so. Part of this was we were seeing this sea change in American society and American politics that really started with the Civil Rights Act being signed by being signed by Lyndon Johnson. And as many of your listeners will know, and as I'm sure you know, at the time Johnson said, "Well, there goes the South for the next 50 years." And at this point, we're
Mhm.
now to 80, 60 years. We're at 60 years. And so many of the people who used to be old school Democrats when the Democratic Party was the party of the Old South, started to become Republicans. It was not just about race, but I think that was where things started. And then we saw the rise of Fox News. Rural people began to feel like they were more cut out. And so we started to see that switch of old school Democrats becoming Republicans. I guess I should be going left to right and not right to left with my hand. Uh,
Yeah, and so, but you're in Nashville, which is a blue city and vast red territory. But it's also, I mean, it's a vibrant city. There obviously there's a lot of culture. There are a lot of Fortune 500 companies. So is there tension there? That's also the capital. So you've got a lot going on there.
Oh, no, there's tension. So Oracle is building their headquarters here now. And of course, Larry Ellison has been a huge supporter of Donald Trump. So Nashville has always had Democratic leaders, and it's in some ways like other large cities. Memphis is a large city; it has Democratic leaders. Urban areas tend to be more Democratic. But as to the tension, a couple of years ago, the Nashville City Council is called Metropolitan Council voted against hosting the Republican National Convention in 2024, and the
Mm,
General Assembly, which has been a Republican supermajority, went kind of nuts with payback. Now, I would argue that they were looking for an excuse to
mm,
enact a retribution on Nashville. And so they passed laws to take over the airport authority, the convention center authority, the sports authority, which oversees the professional sports teams, the Tennessee Titans, the Nashville Soccer Club, a Nashville Predators hockey team. They also passed a law that would cut Metro Council in half. It is a large council. There are 40 people on it.
mhm,
Uh, and I actually think it wouldn't hurt it to be a little bit smaller, but that's another topic of conversation. That's for the
mhm.
people of Nashville decided, not the state. Now, most of those laws that they passed have gotten struck down in court, but there's been
Okay.
significant tension for the last few years.
So, I mean, I would imagine that Nashville is really the engine of Tennessee's economy. And so yet that's the primary tax base, and the reason why so many companies want to come there is because of the city, and yet the state government kind of wants to take all the nice revenue but still tell the city what to do.
Well, Susan, you have already clearly done your research. You are correct. Davidson County and the county immediately south, Williamson County. Williamson County is one of the 10 most affluent counties in the nation. Together, those two counties, and then in East Tennessee, Sevier County, where Dollywood is,
Mm,
produce like three-quarters of the income for the state. I think we're one of the things that we're really starting to see now, and this might be a segue into our like conjoining topic, is immigration.
hmm.
Um, so some of your listeners might have heard, but our congressman or the congressman from the Nashville area who does not live in Nashville, has never lived in Nashville,
Mm,
wants to launch an investigation into the city's mayor over what he claims are his efforts to obstruct ICE enforcement of immigration laws. Now, what the mayor, Freddie O'Connell, did was say, these people who are here in the county these days, conducting these raids, these traffic dragnets, they don't share our values. And that's
mm,
pretty much all he's done. His legal director sent a letter to ICE and the Department of Homeland Security asking for a list of the people who had been deported and what they were charged with. And this
mm.
has turned into like, the old cliche, a federal case. It's turned into a federal case. And if you
Right.
flip from Fox News today, they will be talking about this.
And the mayor of Newark was just arrested a few weeks ago at a protest of ICE. And so we're seeing that, mayors are getting caught in the crosshairs, and, not being in Tennessee from the outside, it basically seems like Mayor O'Connell's crime was asking the government for information.
That is about it. Like
Okay.
if you get prosecuted for sending a strongly worded letter, well, then prosecute many of us. He is being accused now of doxing federal agents. And clearly, some of the folks who were saying that don't understand what the term dox means. There's been a
Mm,
long-standing executive order in Nashville that preceded Mayor O'Connell by a long time that said that the city keeps track of any interactions with the federal government, with federal agencies. And so he amended that just to say he wants that posted within 24 hours because there was a huge public outcry in the city after these raids the first couple of weeks of May. And so he did post, or somebody in his administration posted this list of interactions on the website, and it had a couple of like first and last names of ICE agents. And so now Republicans are saying that he has doxed ICE agents, put them in danger. And,
mm,
the way I look at it is you're a public employee, and putting your
mhm.
name out there should not be any type of problem.
Right. So you can't ask for information, you can't protest. Basically, dissent will not be tolerated. How much pushback is there in terms of the community on what's been going on with these ICE sweeps or anything else that the Trump administration has been doing?
I think in general, the community is really upset about the way this has been handled. We have a very significant and thriving immigrant community in Nashville, maybe more so than people outside the South would think. But for instance, Nashville has the largest Kurdish population outside of Kurdistan. We have a
Wow.
number of Hispanic immigrants. The Nashville Metro Council has a immigrant caucus. And so
Hmm.
they stood up against this. They put letters out, they put notices out, they've held press conferences. There are activists who've tailed ICE around town. Our own photographer, our photojournalist John Partapillo, who I can't say enough good things about, like he will run into a fire to get a good shot and a good picture. And he went out one night and got some great pictures of ICE agents detaining a man, reaching into the car to pull him out. The guy had just left church. And, John got accosted by a Tennessee highway patrolman who was working with ICE, who fortunately recognized John from being up at the Capitol. But yet, people are pretty upset about this. But Tennessee lawmakers, the Republicans in the state House and Senate, continue to pile on to Mayor O'Connell, who is a tremendously popular mayor.
And so I know, for the Tennessee Lookout, you focus obviously on state politics and policy. But how are you covering Trump for the second time? And are there any differences in your coverage from when he was in office the first time?
It's hard for me to even remember the first time which happened. We also launched in May of 2020. So we only covered him in his first term for about 6 months.
Right.
So this time is obviously quite different. And one way he has been, I hate to use this term, but more successful in getting accomplished what he wants to get accomplished. And I think his policies have come home to people outside of DC. Uh, I'm sorry, folks. I'm sorry about my dog. It only barks when I get involved in something. So I am going to shut this door. But yes, Trump's policies are rolling down to the local level much faster
Hmm.
than they did last time. And the immigration issue is one of the more important ones or one of the more noticeable ones. But also, Tennessee's got a thriving electric vehicle industry.
Right.
Got a lot of
You
auto
have the new
manufacturers.
Blue Oval plant that
Yeah.
Ford is building.
Well, now that was supposed to open this year in 2025, and now it's been pushed back to 2027. And part of that is because slowed demand for EV, but also, the quote, big, beautiful bill, a term I'm really tired of hearing about. But
We call it the MAGA murder budget here, but we're a little less, polite.
well, I better stick with the big, beautiful bill on camera. Uh,
Got it.
but yeah, it's cut tax breaks for people who buy EVs, and it's added like a penalty to people who do or surcharge. And so I think it remains to be seen how much that's going to hurt Tennessee's economy.
Right. And obviously, his tariffs policy, that's going to affect you no matter where you live. Um, there are a lot of things coming down the pike. Do you ever hear from, people who voted for Trump who maybe aren't so enamored with what he's been up to this term? Or are people still really with him down in Tennessee?
In Tennessee, we don't hear a lot of pushback. Now,
Hmm.
I think we may start to see that. Agriculture is a huge part of our economy. It's one of our top three industries still: soybeans, cotton, corn. And I think we have to wait and see what tariffs do to the industry. And I'm certainly not an economist, but it's completely unpredictable. I think the tariffs are up, tariffs are off. The term of the week is taco. Trump always chickens out, which I did have to look up yesterday. But I think when we start to see that economic effect really kick in, or when people start to feel pain from tariffs, grocery prices are not going down. But I think it's going to be a long haul in Tennessee. Trump has gotten a higher percentage of the vote each time he's run.
Right. Um, One thing that we saw so much during the last election was just the vast amount of disinformation out there, especially on social media. So, has that kind of changed the way that you have approached how to get facts out there and inform people? How do media outlets compete with lies that go around the world several times before anyone seems to, read an article that really tells you what's happening?
Well, Susan, that's very hard. And I don't have a pat answer for that. Because we live in a state that is highly Republican, and we have plenty of Republican readers as well as Democratic readers.
Mhm.
And I'll get an email from somebody that says, "Well, I think you're biased." And I'll say, well, we cover state government in a state that is a supermajority Republican legislature to U.S. senators who are Republicans and a Republican governor. And if we're going to cover politics, we're going to be writing about Republicans. And by the way, Democrats will still step into some stupid stuff. There are just not as many of them to do it. And when they do step into stuff, we cover that. But I think the situation we're at in the nation with media is people just don't know what to trust or believe now. And
Right.
it's a very difficult situation. So I just kind of we continue to slog away and put the news out. And if somebody doesn't like it and think it's biased, well, there are plenty of other outlets for you to choose from. And we're not for everybody.
Right. What are some of the outlets out there, besides obviously your own, the Tennessee Lookout? Definitely go check it out. That you read regularly or that watch regularly and you think are doing a really good job.
Well, I'm obviously maybe not obviously, but I am a big fan of public radio, and Nashville's public radio outlet, WPLN, Nashville Public Radio. I think they do a phenomenal job. And they also have had a fellowship with ProPublica, which I think is one of the top investigative news organization in the country today. So, public radio, big fan of that. I still read the New York Times. I have a digital subscription, and I cannot bring myself to part with my Sunday hard copy because I love that. I love that sweet big crossword. Um, I don't read the Washington Post as much as I used to. I read ProPublica. I actually love the Texas Tribune. And
Mhm.
you might see a pattern here, and that is generally I'm looking at more nonprofit media and nonprofit
Mhm.
news outlets. There's a TV station in Nashville, News Channel 5. It's the CBS affiliate. They've got a top notch investigative reporter there named Phil Williams, who I guarantee some of your listeners will know of him because he's won a
He
number of national awards.
wasn't he threatened by some alt-right neo-Nazi types not so long ago?
Well, he and I both, although he tends to get more threats because he's a TV person. He's been
Mhm.
threatened numerous times. The occasion you might be thinking about was we had a local mayoral race a couple of years ago where
Right.
the candidate was protected by a group of neo Nazis who described themselves as "we are literal Nazis." And so, and he and I've had coffee and talked about, like, man, how do you deal with this? But yeah, he is frequently the target of threats and
Yeah.
just continues to stand up and do his thing.
Yeah, and that's an aspect of the job that, definitely seems to have increased for journalists is, having threats. And it's not just, people who are on CNN, now it's people, that you might live next door to, in your local media because, if you write an article that people don't like, they get very emotional about it. Have you seen an increase since the 2020 election in
Oh
particular?
yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. We have two staff members who are people of color,
Mhm.
and the I get complaints and threats. And a couple of years ago, this neo-Nazi group posted a picture of my house on one of their, I can't remember now, whichever social media channel it is that they use, and said they were going to come beat me up. But it's more concerning to me when the staff members who are people of color, because the language that's used with them is different. Somebody might threaten to come kick my you know what, but they're not saying that in terms that are explicitly derogatory and racist. They don't like what I say, but I'm still a white person. And I do
Mhm.
particularly worry about those people on my staff. Um, I worry about them even now with these ICE agents in town. Like what John Partapillo, my photographer, is Native American, but he could pass for Hispanic, Middle Eastern. He's carrying his passport card. Like we're living in
Really?
a time where I really am very concerned about our journalists.
Yeah. And, when you have the president of the United States that, calls us Lugan press and, openly encourages people at their rallies to, boo us or assault us, I mean,
Mhm.
that to me, that's a difference because, it's not just, before, maybe you didn't like something that I wrote about your school board. You felt very passionate about that, but you weren't going to, threaten to find my children.
Right.
But now, when the president gives you permission to
Mhm.
make these threats and, that's coming at a state level and you see, that he's willing to deploy people, like ICE agents to commit violence against citizens. Um I know a lot of reporters who don't feel particularly safe right now and are thinking of leaving the industry. And I
Mhm.
don't have solutions for that because, that is really above my pay grade when the
Yeah.
president starts weighing in.
Yeah, and you and I both know a lot of people who have left the industry in even just the last year. And it's not something that scares me a lot, but also I'm a 60-year-old white woman and I live in the city I grew up in. And it doesn't mean that I don't get threats, but I also figure I have less to lose than some people. I don't like to get threatened, but most of the people are bullies. And, I'm going to say what I need to say.
Well, I appreciate that you're willing to stand up because, frankly, not everyone is willing to. And, you know, eh, I I really admire that because, we've seen that it's a lot easier to sell a book on Joe Biden being senile than to question, what the president is doing, rounding people up and trying to throw 15 million people off of healthcare. And so um it's important for people that are doing, the important job of reporting on what's going on in our states and our local communities but are willing to do things in a fearless way and speak truth to power. So I really admire what you do. I love your team too, and I would encourage everyone to check out the Tennessee Lookout because it you will know what's going on in Tennessee very quickly, and a lot of it's going to start sounding very familiar because it's not isolated.
That has been one of the fascinating things about working with the organization that I work with and that you used to be with States Newsroom because we have 39 outlets. And,
Hmm.
I look at other outlets in the network and I'm like, well, this is the same thing that's going on in Tennessee. And
Hmm.
it makes one realize, and this is why it's good to get out of our little bubble every once in a while and look at other outlets because you start to see there's a pattern and it's not these one-offs going on in our state. And to
Right.
dial back a little bit to journalism, it's not explicitly Tennessee, but I know there are still lots of reporters who are very old school and believe that like we shouldn't be biased and things should be like they were in the 1950s and 60s. And and again, not everyone agrees with me, but I believe like there are some things that are clearly morally and ethically wrong.
Hmm.
You have a platform.
Absolutely.
You have,
You know,
I have the platform if you use it to speak out. And again, like I'm blessed or lucky that I have the ability to write personal columns, and that's where I
mhm.
really let it roll.
Yeah. And that's something that I've been able to do for years and I appreciate that. I know a lot of, reporters are cautioned about, ever expressing an opinion on anything as though, reporters are robots. I mean, not yet. I mean, that might be coming as well, but that's a different conversation. But I think that it is really great to see that you are able to give people great information in Tennessee, and still, write those columns that will make people laugh even during the darkest days, because that's something that people need as well. And, you know, for me personally, as a journalist, truth is supposed to be what we're all about. And so, ignoring what is happening, ignoring, these authoritarian changes in America would not be being truthful, with my audience. And so I feel like that's something that I could never compromise on. I could never compromise on, basic human rights and people's dignity. I mean, and if that makes you biased, okay, well, you're biased in favor of humanity. And I'm good with that.
Yeah, it's when I get accused of being liberal, I say, well, here's what I care about, and here's what we write about. We write about civil rights, like sort of old school traditional civil rights. There's a county in West Tennessee that's getting sued for civil rights issues, gerrymandering their school board, so black representatives wouldn't be included. So we cover civil rights. This immigration issue, I think, is really important, and especially in a country where I mean, I'm not going to say anything that nobody on this call has not heard of, but this is a country founded on immigration.
Right.
And I don't really have a problem. I personally do not have a problem with people who are coming here because they want to make their life better. I mean, that seems to be one of the bedrock values of this country that is now not a value. But yes, I do believe in that. And so that makes me liberal. Well, you can call me whatever you want, but this is what we're going to cover. And yeah.
Well, I'm sure that liberal is one of the nicer things that you and I have both ever been called. So, I so appreciate you being on today. It was great connecting with you again, and I certainly hope that you'll come back, Holly.
Well, I would love to come back. Seriously, been super excited about this all week. And folks, I hope you will get the Tennessee Lookout because if you think Tennessee is just Dollywood, it's also anti-democratic behavior.
That is a great sales job. I'm sure that the Chamber of Commerce is going to adopt that. Um, but thank you so much for being here, and thanks for joining us this afternoon.